Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the VECCI COVID-19 business webinar brought to you in conjunction with Small Business Victoria. I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion as we explore some of the hot topics many businesses are talking about at the moment. How will a commercial lease mechanism work? How does a business negotiate with a landlord? The Small Business Commissioner, Judy joins us to discuss and answer some of your questions about the changes recently passed through Parliament. With community transmission and the number of active COVID-19 cases in Victoria encouragingly low, we're becoming more confident that the recovery is in the not too distant future. What this looks like is still very much under discussion, but we know businesses are eager to reopen and start the recovery process because the longer this crisis goes on, the worse the impact will be for the economy. There is real tension in the air around when is the right time for business to restart. Our view at the Chamber is really simple. This is a health crisis, and as good as our collective efforts have been to stop the spread, there is still no vaccine. We absolutely want businesses to reopen, but in doing this, we must minimise and preferably zero the risk of closing businesses again after we restart. In short, we must get this right. So today we'll hear from the construction industry that has found a way to keep operating and at the same time give us all hope that we can operate successfully. Master Builders Associations of Victoria Chief Executive and my friend Rebecca Casson will join me to discuss the processes that were put in place to achieve this. It's a busy webinar ahead, and thanks for taking the time to join us. If you need help preparing your businesses to restart, you can find it at www.victorianchamber.com.au and of course www.business.vic.gov.au. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce my first guest, Judy O'Connell, the Small Business Commissioner. Welcome, Judy.
Thanks very much, Paul. It's great to be here and it's great to speak to so many small businesses in Victoria.
Fabulous. You play such an important role as the Small Business Commissioner, although I'm sure some of our members may not know your remit. In fact, they may not know how you might be able to help them. Could you give us a quick overview into your role as Small Business Commissioner?
Yes, certainly. So the Small Business Commission is an independent government agency. So we are independent, although we are paid by the government. And really we're there to make sure there's a competitive and level playing field for small businesses when they're dealing and trying to run their business. So quite often it can be very hard when they're up against a large business or a government bureaucracy about going through the myriad of requests or regulations that they have to adhere to. So what we really do is probably threefold. The first thing is we, on systemic issues, we'll advocate on behalf of small businesses.
Right.
We will look at their rights and responsibilities and make sure and try and educate them, and also to actually resolve those disputes. So in terms of advocacy, some of the key issues that we have been looking at are payment terms, so getting sure that businesses are paid within 30 days, and now during the COVID-19, the government's actually paying within 10 days.
Fabulous, isn't it?
Trying to get that through for all businesses, because at this stage, as always, cash flow is the #1 issue for small businesses. We're doing a lot on mental health and making sure that the businesses, especially when they're isolated at home, are able to still keep mentally healthy, because if they're mentally healthy, then they'll be on top of their business. So they're the sort of things we do on a systemic issue. And the dispute resolution is the issue that we're doing a fair bit of now.
So I gather you and the team have a really good understanding of small business and the operation that small businesses operate under.
Yeah, it's true to say that there's just, no one small business. There's many small businesses. Before this started, we had over 600,000 small businesses. My aim is that we will still have a large percentage of those when we come back. Interesting stats I thought people might be interested in. The ATO have just released actually the decline in businesses actually registering for an ABN There's been a 40% decline in taxis and Uber drivers, 25% in commercial property, and 30% in takeaway food. But on the upside, we've had a 140% increase in health services, ABNs, 65% growth in couriers, and 53% growth in things like respite care and marriage guidance counsellors.
Wow. Very diverse, ups and downs there.
Yeah.
I know talking to our members, topical right now is rent. You know, how can small businesses engage with their landlords to negotiate with them, particularly where the discussions previously have collapsed? Where can you play a role in that?
Yeah, so what the Small Business Commission has always done is any small business that has a commercial dispute with another business or a government agency can come to us and we will resolve it first by talking to both parties. So if, for example, it's that you've provided a good and service and they haven't paid for you, you've received faulty goods, the landlord hasn't fixed the leaky roof, you could come to us and in the first instance, we'll contact both parties and try to resolve it both ways, and that's free. That's a free service. And if that doesn't work, we sit you down with a mediator, who in the main is a lawyer or a barrister, who will sit both parties down and try and resolve the dispute. And we have an 80% success rate for that. It's usually $195 for that service. Keeps it out of the court system and very much cheaper than having to go to court.
That's fabulous. So the first part, they can get some free support, and the second part, it's almost a fixed cost support in that instance with a mediator, which is just fabulous, particularly from a small business that right now is on the difficult end of the COVID-19 crisis. Judy, we've got a number of questions coming through, and I'd encourage everyone to keep the questions coming through. But before we get to that, I might ask you one more before we go to question, and that's in your opinion, in your experience, what can and should small businesses be doing at the moment during the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, the first thing that they really should be doing is finding out what their financial situation is, talk to their accountant or bookkeeper and actually find out what they can do and find out what support is available. At the moment, we had the Omnibus Act passed last week, which was around providing support for tenants during this crisis. So there's a 6-month moratorium on landlords being able to evict tenants. They can't evict tenants from the 29th of March through to the 29th of September. The idea is that small businesses who are either retail tenants or commercial tenants should, in the first instance, talk to their landlord and try and work out an agreement to waive or defer some of their rent. But if they can't do that, then to contact us and we will actually mediate these. We will do them free. So we're doing this service free to make sure that the landlord and tenant have got an agreement in place about what they should do about their rent. Because what we want in Victoria going forward is you've got JobKeeper to keep your employees. If you have your premises ready, when this is finished, we will be able to get those businesses up and running fairly quickly.
Brilliant. Judy, we've got a number of questions coming in, so I'm going to hand over to Anne Wright, Becky's Head of Media and Comms, to ask you those questions. Morning, Anne.
Thank you, Paul. David has asked, how will the regulations assist small businesses negotiate lease outcomes where there is less than 12 months left on the lease and a low likelihood of reopening and recovering in that period?
So unfortunately, the leases, well, unfortunately for this morning, the regulations haven't been finished. They're probably going to be finalised next week. So I can't talk about what the regulations will look like. But what I would say is, even if you have got less than 12 months to go and you don't think you want to, you don't think you'll be able to open again, you need to talk to your landlord in the first instance and try to come to some arrangement. But again, if they can't, then contact us and we can contact the landlord and still try and negotiate an agreement. So we've had a lot of cases where people are wanting to terminate their lease lease early, and we can negotiate those.
Thanks, Judy. And another, I think it's a different David, has also asked, we have seen a number of businesses saying their landlords want to see proof of loss. They argue this is commercial in confidence. Is there any comment?
Yeah, look, this has been a real issue. To be eligible, you have to be less than 50 million turnover, and so you've got to prove that you're less than 50 million turnover, and you've got to be in JobKeeper. You've got to actually be participating in JobKeeper. So as long as you've got that form from the tax office, that's enough. If you want to be, and I think the eligibility for JobKeeper is actually a 30% reduction in turnover. If your reduction in turnover is more than that and you want to be negotiating something different with the landlord, you will be needing to provide turnover results. So the key thing here is turnover. It's not profit and loss. It's not a balance sheet for the last 2 years. It's what your turnover is. You need to prove what your turnover was, say, 12 in this financial year, how it's dropped. So that's the key thing, that turnover.
Thanks, Anne. I know there's a number of more questions there, and we'll get those questions answered, Judy, with your help, and get them out as part of the webinar later on as well. But thank you, Judy. Fabulous insights. And it's really comforting to know that small business in Victoria has you supporting them. And together, Becky stands shoulder to shoulder with you to support those small businesses. But we really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Paul.
My next guest has performed incredibly on behalf of the industry she represents, working with the government and the unions in a true sense of cooperation that has enabled the construction sector to keep going. Rebecca Casson, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Paul, and to your colleagues, and to Judy, doing a fantastic job here on these webinar series, and Judy, such a great amount of experience and knowledge to be able to pass on. So even, I learned a great deal from your presentation. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Paul and your team, thanks for having me on this morning.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a constant. I get asked when I speak to our members, the construction industry is such a shining light in the ability to keep going through this. How have they done it? I thought, well, what better way than to ask somebody that's been in the hot seat the whole way through. Beck, what's been the experience of the construction industry through this?
Well, Paul, as you know, and many of you will know, the building and construction industry in Victoria is our state's largest full-time employer. What people might not understand is that it contributes over 45% of our state's tax revenue. And independent analysis shows that shutting down our industry would cost 25 billion, and there'd be almost 200,000 jobs lost. So given this, it's clear to see why building and construction, it affects everybody, it touches everyone. So we've been designated an essential service because, bluntly, we're building hospitals and all of the infrastructure facilities that the government needs right now to help our economy through this pandemic. So, but all of that said, it has not been an easy thing to keep our industry open. It's a very different environment now on sites with physical distancing and hygiene measures in place. And the experience is ever changing. It's almost like building an aeroplane whilst it's in the sky. Probably not a good analogy given there's very limited airplanes in the sky right now. But it's a minute by minute thing, monitoring and adjustments. And as I've said time and time again, Master Builders Victoria cares deeply for the well-being of our state, of our people and businesses who live here. We've taken this very seriously. There's a lot of pressure on us because we are open and we are trying to keep sites safe and open at the same time. And it's an enormous amount of pressure, and it's provided us with the motivation to work hard to keep our own members informed. And you're doing a great job, Paul, in your role, still fairly new in your role, but you would know, keeping members informed is really key. And since the early days of the pandemic, we've delivered a series of daily updates to our members, and members have come to us as the single point of truth. There's a lot of information out there. So we've enabled the industry to keep open through that information as well. And, and pulling together has helped our members rise to this very extraordinary occasion. And now how the construction industry and the building construction industry has remained open is indeed a case study in itself.
Yeah. So can you talk to us a bit about that? I love the communication piece that you've done with your sector, and clearly the relationship between the union and government is strong. But if I come down into the actual practice on site, what have you been able to do to keep it open?
That's right. So our industry certainly has remained open through an enormous amount of hard work by our members and advocacy from a united group of associations, industry associations and unions. And I, again, just take a moment to acknowledge the great work that you've been doing, Paul, with your team, with the Victorian Trades Hall and others. I know you've been doing great work there. And this is really important work going forward. I do want to acknowledge, though, the support that we've received from both federal and state governments for our industry. And secondly, I want to just give a shout out to those industry associations that we've been working very closely with in our industry. For example, Danny Hunter at the UDIA, Cressida Wall at the Property Council of Australia in Victoria, and also Fiona Neild at the Housing Industry Association. You know, it's not something that we can do on our own.
Yeah.
I can't name everyone, but that's just a few people. And whilst I might talk about the unions later, I also acknowledge John Setka and the CFMEU. But if I start at the beginning, and I'll try and keep it brief because I know that everyone's time is limited, but let me just remind everyone that it's literally only 6 weeks ago, on the 16th of March, we realised that this needed urgent attention. And given all of the economic facts and figures that I've given you, we understood that, you know, to close building construction would have a massive impact, deeper and broader than anybody has ever seen before in relation to our economy. So on the 16th of March, on that day when that realisation hit, we held a high-level whiteboard session with the unions, with the CFMEU and with some employers. And just 2 days later, we put that into a document, and we were on the steps of Parliament House taking a photo to promote our joint approach. And we met with the Premier's private office, all of the ministerial offices. And the key here was that we also met with the Deputy Chief Health Officer to give them comfort that we would focus right there and then, 6 weeks ago, on developing our own set of safety guidelines for our industry. And version 1 of those guidelines were distributed just 5 working days later from that meeting. An enormous effort. Yeah. And let me remind people, we're dealing with vertical construction where you've got 800 workers on one site. How do you physically distance in those spaces? And our members just really responded. So it's important to note that the guidelines were informed by all of the relevant government authorities, including WorkSafe and the Victorian Department of Health and Human Services. Now, another reminder is that we've only had 2 cases of C19 on sites, on construction sites. But when they came through, we used them as learning opportunities. It wasn't that we were blaming anyone. We wanted to have, what we knew then is that we needed a dedicated industry liaison role and a dedicated 1-800 number to be established for the building and construction industry. So we advocated for that, and we secured both. And then finally, many of our members and their clients were being stopped by the police. So we issued essential letters for our workers and for our clients as well, many of our members, and we did that as a letter template. And, you know, as an industry association, we focused on industrial relations, OHS, legal, education, training, and events for our members to make sure that they could keep ahead of everything as well. So that's how we've managed to keep things open so far. But, you know, there's lots of lessons that we can learn in relation to the future as well.
I'm looking forward. I mean, some of those insights are brilliant. And as you talked about, the speed of which everything came together, and the speed of unions, yourself and government coming together to enable that to happen is just brilliant. I want to talk, and I know there's some questions coming in, so I'll throw to Anne shortly. But I want to talk about the relationship that's been forged with the CFMEU through this, and what that means in a post-COVID world. And I know we've been working hard with Luke from Trades Hall as well in terms of where do we go after this? And in your view, what are the lessons for other industries out of the cooperation that you forged here?
Yeah, look, first I really got to highlight, and it's a bit of an elephant in the room really, and given the reputation of the CFMEU, I had to dig very deep, both personally and professionally. It was a very challenging time for me personally and professionally, and for lots of other people as well, who a lot of history between our two organisations.
Yeah.
And you know, before making the public statement of unity with John Setka and standing on the steps of Parliament House with him and those other unions, we had to think long and hard about that. But we recognise, you know, these are very extraordinary times. And, you know, the learning that I have taken from it, it's got to be recognised that you do have opponents in business. And that's only because that you actually sometimes care about the same things. And that often reveals opportunities that you didn't anticipate. So, and in times of crisis, you know, it's very interesting. You'll be surprised at the common ground that you can find. And it's been amazing that we've been able to collaborate together. And I'm very grateful to John and his team for the mutual support. The positive action that John and I took on behalf of our organisation certainly provided a blueprint, and many others followed nationally in our footsteps. But, you know, make no mistake about this, throughout this time of cooperation, we have maintained our very robust position regarding enterprise bargaining agreements or other industrial negotiations or policy. We haven't missed a heartbeat on that. And post C19, though, to answer your question, Paul, I'm really optimistic about our future relationship with the CFMEU and other unions as well, the plumbers and the electrical trades. You know, our relationship really has got so much better. And it really is important that you get to know people in a crisis like this. And I must say that it's a real credit to John Setka and his team for conducting themselves in a professional and collegiate manner to work with us to keep our industry open in this time of crisis. And if we can do that, then I'm absolutely sure that many others can do that too.
Ultimately, the drive that you talk about is to keep all jobs and therefore everybody in a job. And we know the best way to do that is for businesses to remain open and viable into the future as well. So that commonality really does intersect there, which is great. And we've got time for a couple of quick questions, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Paul. And Annie has asked, how is development and communication of physical distancing and hygiene compliance being established and managed? So hospitality and tourism will need to learn this and plan to put this in place so that they can open sooner rather than later.
So we've done a lot of scenario planning and preparation, but we've, you know, let me explain. We've got, you know, on a vertical construction site where people normally come together 800 for a toolbox talk, the construction companies have now marked on the floor where everybody should stand, and they've measured everything out. In an alley map, and you might have seen in elevators in other buildings, you know, you've got where you can actually stand and how you should face. And this is not going to go away anytime soon. So we've all got to adapt. And so one of the things that we're working on at the moment is preparing some scenario planning in the residential sector, so that we're hopeful that very soon that display homes can be opened for residential sales, because it's important that, you know, we've seen a material drop off of 90% in visitations and a 50% decrease in sales in that area. So we've been working on a case study with Porter Davis Homes, and a big shout out to them, because we've said, show us and demonstrate to us, take a video, photos, how are you going to get people in, how are you going to get them out, where are they going to stand, how many people are you going to allow in one room at a time. And they've just done that overnight. And now I take that with me to the government and I say, this is how we can give you the confidence that we can do this and we can do it safely. But make no mistake, I've also called out and we've said, if people are doing the wrong thing, then they must be held to account. So the people that are doing the wrong thing have got to, you know, got to make sure that they don't bring everybody else down with them.
Thank you. And I have a question here from Wendy. Judy, you may also be interested in answering this as well. So Wendy has asked, what are the top 3 industrial relation issues for construction industry small businesses?
So Beck, I might get you to go first.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Certainly our experience, the key issues that we've had are, you know, standing people down, and what does that mean? And people not wanting to come to work, and what does that mean? And, you know, and a whole other range of complex issues, people who are finding themselves. And even though the building and construction industry has remained open, let me just be really clear, it's been tough. Productivity is at 30% for some people. And you know, one of my members is paying $380,000 a week just on cleaning to keep their site open, just a week. And that's an enormous amount of profit. And you know, I think that it shouldn't be underestimated. So you really have to make sure that the industrial relations aspects of that is taken into account in terms of in cleaning, etc.
Yeah, Judy, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, look, I think staffing is a big issue. You know, we have found a lot of businesses who may have been able to, you know, take away foods, or hairdressers may have been able to stay open, but they haven't had the staff that are willing to, and that's fair enough for some reasons. So that's an issue. Cash flow, of course, is an issue, and you know, we sort of say that there is some help out there with both the federal and the state government with some of their grants. And you know, the banks are playing ball and providing support there, and the tax office, if you can't pay your BAS, you just have to give them a call and they'll do that. So they're probably, and then the leasing issues, which we've already addressed.
Brilliant, thank you, Judy. Rebecca, your insights were just fabulous, and I really appreciate you giving up your time today to talk to our members. There are more questions there, so we'll have those answered. And we'll talk to Beck and Judy and get the answers back online as well. Well, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you, Judy and Rebecca, for your time today and the fabulous insights you provided. As we look forward to the restart of the Victorian economy, businesses are planning as best they can in these uncertain times. I'd love to hear more about what your business is doing in order to get ready to get going again. That ends today's webinar, and I hope you found it useful and informative. Of course, we're grateful for the support of Small Business Victoria, and for all the assistance you need, you can head to www.business.vic.gov.au, and of course, information is always available at the Vicky website. Next week, our webinar features a very special guest, the Victorian Treasurer, Tim Pallas, covering the COVID-19 recovery and the future, importantly, of the Victorian economy. Register now for the live webinar, as we've got limited places for this one, and I'm pretty confident this one's going to book out. You will have an opportunity to talk to the Treasurer directly, so start thinking about the questions, because you will get an opportunity to pose those. Just finally, a week ago, the state was rocked by the deaths of 4 police officers. I know you stand with us in expressing our sympathy and thoughts to the family and friends of those officers, and in fact to all of the police force. So today at 5:30, take a minute to thank the police chief, take a minute to thank the whole force on everything that they do for us. Appreciate if you can do that. Finally, have a good week. Thanks.